first. But yeah, with that, I'm going to welcome Hunter, and thank you for being here, man.
Yeah, great to be here, and thankful to the EC for allowing me to kind of hop in the middle of everything going on and share about a topic that for me is an area that I kind of live in and work in my clinical work, but also may hit home for some of you as well for your specific work too. I am currently a assistant professor of what's called family science at Lipscomb University. I'm also a marriage and family therapist that works at the Briggs Institute, which is located in downtown Nashville. I primarily work with professionals that are burned out or on the cusp of burning out. And I also work primarily with men in regards to their mental health and relationships. So I just kind of I've got a slideshow here, some presentation. I'm going to talk through some of this, but I will say that given COVID, I understand the reality of this being online. I wish that we could all be in a room together and we could kind of talk through a lot of this, because I think a lot of it in many ways, if you haven't experienced burnout pre-COVID, you may either be on the cusp of it now, or you may be in the throes of it, or someone very close to you may be there as well. So just kind of some guidelines, some overview of today, just what's helpful for me to kind of keep the conversation going and the dialogue. And also as we go along, feel free to participate as much or as little as you would like. You can type questions in the chat. I've built in specific points throughout the time this afternoon where I'm going to pause and take questions or thoughts from anyone that may be here. When you do share, if you chime in via audio or video, if you wouldn't mind saying your name just so it'll pop up on my screen and I can try to address you specifically. There's no wrong answers, and I always tell people every time I give presentations along these lines and workshops, I always learn something new from when someone else chimes in and shares their perspective. But also saying I don't know, or I don't understand, or I don't buy this is fine. And chances are, if you're thinking that at any point in time, someone else may be as well. So I hope that you will feel comfortable voicing those things, those thoughts as well. And lastly, if someone does share about this, I hope that you will give them kind of your undivided attention as best you can right now in the middle of everything, because it's difficult sometimes to talk about our own personal experiences with regards to burnout. So this is where I kind of want to open it up for the first couple minutes. And does anyone here want to share or answer any one of these three questions? The first, why do you think it's important to have this conversation? Two, in what ways have you noticed those in your profession or field experiencing burnout? Or three, in what ways do you think you have already experienced or might be experiencing burnout?
I guess I can say something. Obviously, there's a lot of weight on your shoulders as an entrepreneur, and there's really no one watching you but yourself. So you feel obligated to just keep doing something, even if you're not sure what there is. And you can kind of just push yourself beyond kind of what's reasonable, not knowing what you're doing. And then there's kind of a lot of expectations surrounding being an entrepreneur. And then there's that kind of toxic entrepreneur culture of working 20-hour days and all that kind of ties in. And we're surrounded by that on social media. I think that might tie in.
Yeah. And that was Charles, correct?
Oh yeah, sorry. Yeah, Charles.
Yeah, Charles. Yeah, so the kind of the narrative of being an entrepreneur, what all we think sometimes comes with that, and then maybe having to live that out or find a way to meet that in the midst of everything going on kind of can bring on the experience of burnout. So yeah, thanks for sharing, Charles. Anyone else want to chime in or answer any one of these questions?
I'll jump in here.
Yeah. Is this
Stephen? Yeah.
Stephen, all right.
Yeah. So I think I lived through the financial crisis of 2008. And I think one of the things that can happen is a lot of people unfortunately lose their jobs in something like this with COVID. And I think that that's terrible for people that lose their jobs. But I think the flip side is people that are able to keep their jobs kind of don't know if someone's looking over their shoulder, don't know if the budget's going to be there for them. And they almost really step on the gas pedal to just, get through the crisis just so they can, not get laid off. And I think that, I saw that in 2008. I was a young associate then. And, all of us were like working till 11 o'clock at night, taking the GMAT. And it was this whole, like, we're grateful we have a job, but we're going to just absolutely kill ourselves so that, when it's time for another round of layoffs, we're not part of that round. So that's a super challenging, part of dealing with the crisis. People sometimes go pedal a little too fast just to, make ends meet.
Yeah. Stephen, I'm there with you. I went through that as well. And I remember my mindset being to 2008 stuff was don't stand out either way. Don't do too good and don't do too bad. Just kind of try to hide and try to not get noticed because I didn't know everything felt like it was walking on eggshells. And I had these blinders on of like, I just got to do the thing in front of me and that's it. And it was still stressful, even thinking like I'm doing what I'm doing, but is there something else I need to be doing or not doing? And so even now with COVID and a lot of things that entrepreneurs do experience, there's sometimes that unknown factor that may be sitting on the shoulder and that voice of, well, are you doing enough? Are you doing too much? Are you doing what you need, the right thing? Are you doing the wrong thing? That can speak, and maybe someone jumps into something that they don't need to, or pumps the brakes when maybe they don't need to. Yeah, good. Anybody else? Maybe one more. Any one of these questions?
Well, hi, this is Gloria.
Hey, Gloria.
Hi there. I think I am experiencing burnout because my company decided I was an essential worker, so I've been here through it all. I've only been off twice, and that's because I had to get tested and wait for my results to come back because we were exposed to people that later tested positive. But other than that, I've been here the whole time.
Yeah. Wow. Well, Gloria, thank you for sharing and the work that you do. And sorry, was that someone else that was chiming in?
Yes. That was.
Sorry, that was me. Gloria was cutting out for me. I didn't know if she was cutting out for anyone else. Sorry to interrupt if not, or if it was my connection.
No worries. No worries. But Gloria, you were saying kind of being on the front lines of everything and being there kind of day in, day out is bringing on the experience of burnout.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah.
I'm going through it now. I'll be glad to when we figure out what our normal will be.
Yeah.
I don't know what normal is.
Yeah, I think a lot of us are there with you right now. Of normal is there isn't really a normal right now in the middle of everything going on, which is one of the causes of burnout. When there's a significant amount of uncertainty, there is this experience of burnout that can be brought on. So thank you, Charles, Stephen, and Gloria for chiming in and answering some of those questions. I want to share a quick story that this was something a few months ago. I had a phone conversation with an old friend that is an entrepreneur up in New York City, and it had been a little while since I had spoken with this person. And when I was talking with them, I heard in their voice on the phone burnout. I heard the worry and the concern and the anxiety of, I think we only have about a month left of cash reserves. I don't know where the next round of funding is coming from. I've got 50 to 60 people that I employ, and they don't know this. I heard them talk about what it's like for them on a day-to-day basis to try to just do some of the basic things where they're spending 20 hours at work each day and they still don't feel like they're doing enough. I heard them talk about how they felt incredibly isolated, like as if they were the only one experiencing this with what's going on in their company. And as I was listening to them talk about, there eventually came a turn in their voice when they said, but one of the things that has really kept me going is this idea that I know that there are people there that want to help me and want to be alongside me in this process. And that to me was one of the indications that while he may be on the cusp of burnout and maybe even have dipped his leg or his toe in there for a little bit, there is something there though, which is the support part that can help us get through burnout. And so I was just listening for all these little indicators and telltale signs of like, okay, that's burnout, that could be burnout, that could be burnout. And yet there are also these other things, other factors, protective factors, as we call them sometimes, that can mitigate against the experience of burnout. And specifically for this, my friend was, they, at his core, they knew that it was an us experience as opposed to just them or me experience. So that it was us in this together, which was a way that each day he knew how he was going to get up and move forward. So with that, with the idea of burnout, and this happens in a lot of different professions, a lot of different roles, specifically helping professional roles, but also entrepreneurs and business owners. Some people have described it as a smothering of a fire. If you have ever seen a fire be put out, sometimes it slowly goes out. Other times there is water that is just douses the fire and completely puts it out immediately. But in terms of professional burnout, there are really three kind of main core areas. First is the emotional exhaustion, that there is this tax that comes with the work that an entrepreneur or a professional or a healthcare professional may do. They feel depleted and drained in so many different areas of their life. There's a dehumanization for them and for others. So they become cynical and callous and pessimistic of themselves and in their attitudes and behavior towards other people. And then this idea of personal accomplishment. I don't know that I have ever met someone who has said, yes, I want to be horrible at what I do. Everybody has this longing and this desire to feel capable and competent. But when they are someone may be on the cusp of burnout, what tends to happen is that whatever results or expectations they have or are looking for, they don't happen, whether that's income, contracts, projects being completed. And in turn, what happens is they feel as if they are not worthwhile. There's a worthlessness or a helplessness, and whatever intrinsic motivation they had, meaning that they knew at their core what was important to them, that tends to dissipate and instead comes on an apathy. And what you were describing of like, I just kind of have to put my blinders on and do the next thing in front of me. So the motivation for diving into the work, really thinking critically about it, that tends to go out the window when there is burnout. How does it happen? It's important to note that burnout does not happen overnight, and it doesn't happen with the flip of a switch. While it may seem like it in the moment, for burnout specifically, it is a slow and gradual process that comes about when stress piles up and piles up and piles up. Now, the note about stress that I have to make here is there's actually such a thing as good stress. It's called eustress, EUSTRESS. When we all need a little bit of stress to get us up and out of the bed in the morning and get going. But when that stress becomes so much, that's when we tend to experience some of the dysfunction or the negative aspects of stress. And that's where distress comes into play. And so stress to any one of us means any different number of things. It may be, how am I going to pay the bills? How am I going to get to work? How am I going to hop on this phone call? And what information do I feel like I need to know that I don't know? All of that could be considered stress. And for each person, their stress level is different at different levels, which is important to take note of, that just because you go through something and seemingly come out okay on the other end of it, that may not be the case for everyone else that you are around and that you may work with. So at the core of this too is, how does this begin to kind of trickle up or down and affect your work in your business? So when we have the blinders on, there are missed opportunities. One of the things that comes up in any type of negotiation is, do I either have a fixed pie mindset, or am I able to see other opportunities that can be created that may not initially be there? If I am burned out, I am less likely to see those other opportunities that may be business opportunities, networking, or whatever the case may be. My employees will start to not show up, and they'll start to just say, I'm done. And as a manager, I may take this as, wow, my employees are ghosting me, or they may not care, but I may have to dig a little bit deeper and see what systemically is causing their absenteeism and their turnover. There's going to be lower quality work, and there's going to be inconsistent work, meaning that someone that typically may just do things, turn things in by deadlines, they're going to be, yes, this week they're there, next week, no, they missed one. It's going to be kind of all over the place. There's a lot of disorganization and wasted time. And then I'm going to spend more time managing the symptoms and the fallout of burnout internally in my organization and externally than actually doing the business that I want to do for my company or organization. So burnout has both, we could say, direct costs and indirect costs for any company, for any organization. And these are all things that I want to say from the onset that can be mitigated and can be dealt with and managed well to actually be helpful to companies once they get at the root of what's going on. There's also this other component to all of this that says, and I hear this sometimes with those that I work with, that, well, that's just my work life and I've got my personal life over there. And the reality is that whatever goes on in any number of these spheres, of these environments, whether it's my work environment or my personal environment, it's going to affect one or the other or both. So if I have a crummy, crappy day at work and I go home to my partner, more than likely they are going to experience the effects. They're going to experience the crappiness of my work if I don't manage that well. Same, the opposite is also true. If my work or my personal life is kind of chaotic, I may be bringing that into my work sphere. So it's just important to recognize that this whole idea of compartmentalization that sometimes is pervasive, like, oh, that's just my work self, personal self. The reality is that it's all tied together and it all impacts the other part of it. And then there's this song, and I referenced this artist earlier in the call. Keb Mo has this song called "A Suitcase," and it's this idea that people bring a past into everything that they do. They bring their schemas and beliefs, which are basically their views of the world and themselves and others, their stigmas and stereotypes, their successes and strengths, their social support systems, history of trauma and illness, their economic situation, and so much more. Everybody is bringing that to the table, so to say, when they walk into the door at work. What may be different is that for some of us, all that is left in the suitcase underneath the table, and we think it doesn't affect the work that we do, and when in reality it does. So for example, I have worked with a client years ago who was having difficulty managing their team. When we dove into a little bit more, what we found out is that the team members they were exhibiting behaviors and attitudes, beliefs, all that kind of stuff that were reminiscent of the family that that individual grew up in. Once we dove into that and kind of began to address that suitcase stuff that they were bringing into work, their work situation began to improve and their family and personal relationships began to improve as well. So all that I want to say here is that this suitcase is something that we all have, whether or not we acknowledge it or not. So I want to pause there real quick and see if there are any questions or thoughts that anyone may have. And you can shout those out, or you can put those in the chat too. All right, so I'll jump on to the next part then. There are two burnout dynamics, and this is sometimes challenging, I think, for those that I work with, and for me too. I feel as if sometimes everything is all on me. And so as an individual, I do need to be asking myself, how am I caring for myself, doing what's important? How have I defined boundaries about myself and my work? And I don't mean walls. When walls are built up, that means I can't get out and nothing can get in. But there's also this group, this team, this organization component, which is more often than not left not to be considered. And here's what I mean by that. I have several friends that work in the healthcare industry, healthcare field as medical professionals. And some of them told me recently that their hospital, whatever company, purchased the Headspace app, like a subscription for everybody at their hospital to do mindfulness. I thought that's great. But what that doesn't take into consideration is the system part that comes into play when we're talking about burnout. So I can do all the mindfulness I want till I'm blue in the face. But if every day I walk into a system that is dysfunctional, chaotic, not organized, is not streamlined, then I'm going to be re-entering the experience of potentially being burned out more and more. So when we're talking about burnout, we don't just have to look at it at an individual level. We also have to look at it at an organizational, systemic level as well. And when both of these are happening well, meaning the individual level and the group system organizational level, there is a greater likelihood that burnout will begin to creep in. And so again, I just want to note, it's really important to consider not just what any individual is doing, but if I'm a manager, I'm not just saying, well, you're not doing this. I also have to say, what are we doing that may be contributing to the experience of burnout for our team and our employees? So when I'm looking at burnout, and I'm, like I said earlier on that phone call with my friend, what are the signs and symptoms that I'm looking for? At an individual level, I'm looking for exhaustion and cynicism. Do I feel like someone doesn't seem as if they're effective at what they do? Is there dissatisfaction? Extrinsic motivation means that there has to be something kind of dangling in front of me to do the work, so I kind of have to be led along. Motivation is more about like an apathy than anything else. So like maybe a helplessness. There's sleep, which we're going to talk about health and here in a little bit. There's symptom relief coping, which are really more numbing activities to kind of deal with the stress that I may be experiencing. Difficulty concentrating. I may become codependent, meaning that I need others to really get me through something, where I find my worth and my value in what others think of me. Or I may lean towards isolation, meaning withdrawing myself from others that are important to me and in moments that are important to me. Or I may be on edge constantly. I recently worked with an individual who had come out of a pretty hectic, chaotic work situation. And after some of the symptoms that they were experiencing, they were really, in the time period that they'd been there, they really had experienced PTSD when I told them that, they were kind of shocked to think like, well, that doesn't happen in the work environment. And the reality is it can, if it happens long enough, if someone is there and experiencing these individual symptoms long enough. But there's also, again, like I said just a second ago, a group level consideration. When there's more than usual team friction, and sometimes friction is good, friction helps us move forward in some ways, but how that's done can be a contributing factor to burnout. Meaning specifically, if there's an us versus them attitude that is pervasive throughout my company or organization. There's also maybe getting caught in the middle, or these cliques or teams that are formed that don't really serve a purpose other than to insulate themselves and kind of prop up for them what they think is the right thing or protect themselves. Projects get put on the back burner. There's a lot of avoidance of work and others, meaning that if I know that person A is someone that I'm pissed off at or that is really bothering me, if we both get to work at 8 a.m., I'm going to park on the other end of the parking lot, and I'm going to wait until they walk in so that I may not have to ride the elevator up with them and talk with them. That type of avoidance behavior begins to creep in. I may also say to myself, you know what, I know I really need to address this situation, this conflict, whatever the case may be, but I haven't cleaned out my desk in the past year. And you know what, I'm going to start doing that now. So that's where burnout begins to creep in. That's one of the symptoms of burnout. And then the statement of, I don't know, it's someone else's job. That was an experience that I had working at an organization several years ago, where there was a lot of burnout being experienced. And when I approached someone and I asked them about something, their response to me was, I don't know, it's someone else's job. And in a way that could be okay, I'm developing a boundary around kind of what is mine and what my responsibilities. But in this sense, it was, I don't feel like dealing with it. I don't want to really answer that question. I don't want to think about it. I don't know. It's someone else's job. Go talk to them. So if I'm sitting in my company and I'm taking what's called kind of like an observer position, I am looking at, do I see any of these signs or symptoms going on for me and for the team or company or organization that I'm a part of as well? This next part is where we begin to kind of turn the page, I think, about this conversation about burnout. There's been a lot of conversations now around COVID about what is resiliency. And resiliency is kind of like the ability to not just grind it out, but its ability to bounce back in a way that is either that is in a healthy, like I'm able to move forward. I'm not maybe able to leap or jump forward as far as I want, but I'm able to take the next step in a helpful way. A lot of people think that resiliency, though, is just about grinding it out. Like, I just got to do the next thing. That's it. I got to put my blinders on. And the reality is, if there's not something accompanying that process, then eventually that slow, gradual process of burnout will happen. So what we know for resilient people, they have a defined recovery period, meaning that they work hard and they work smart. They take intentional time to rest their bodies and their mind and their heart, and they engage in healthy activities consistently. And this consistency is very, very important. So if I ask someone, how much sleep did you get last night? And they say, I got 10 hours. Great. How much sleep did you get the night before? 2 hours. And the night before that, 4 hours. The night before that, 12 hours. That type of inconsistency is going to begin to manifest in their day-to-day attitudes and behaviors. Same thing for our diet and exercise. Spending intentional time with others. We need others. We need other people. We need important relationships. Just right now, it may look differently than pre-COVID. And then how regularly do I deal with my stuff? Meaning that suitcase full of things that I'm bringing in, do I keep that under the table locked? Or am I taking a look at how that may be informing what I think or I do and what I may need to do about it? So one of the things that I have tried to do, and this was told to me by a mentor of mine, If I just do this real brief daily process, what did I do well today? With what did I feel lost and how come? And then what can I do differently next time? That helps me take a look at, but I'm not going to let things just pile up and sit there and weigh me down, but I'm going to proactively manage what is going on for me and what I'm committing myself to. So this brings up the whole idea of self-care. And sometimes when I talk with individuals or organizations, this whole idea of self-care is like, that's nice, but we don't really do that here. And I say, well, just give it a little while and get ready to experience the fallout of not doing this consistently. So it's not indulgent, but it's one of the prevention measures that we do know exists to prevent and mitigate burnout. So what is self-care? It is intentional, regular activities that address our mental, emotional, spiritual, and physical health and allow for us to be connected to others in a meaningful way. What it is not is binging on Netflix, online shopping, regularly scheduled meetings, and all that other stuff that I have listed there. What I need to note here is that something that could be a self-care activity could also be an avoidance activity. For example, I love to run. Every day I try to just go out, whether it's lightly jogging or a hard run for about 20 to 30 minutes. But if I find myself running for 2 to 3 hours, I know now enough about myself to know that I may be avoiding something. And so I need to maybe pump the brakes and say, what is it that I'm trying to numb myself with this running activity or avoid? And what do I need to do instead of going on a 2 or 3 hour run? So self-care, though, is a part of this whole conversation about burnout. You can't have a conversation about preventing and mitigating burnout without talking about self-care. And one of my old mentors said it was, the way he described it was a benevolent selfishness. For me to be able to do good work for others and with others, I have to be a little selfish at times. I have to draw some healthy boundaries around my time and what I do and how I do it if I'm going to be able to do really good work. So what this brings up, if I see burnout, what do I do? One of the first things I always tell people is just own it. Don't try to avoid it. Don't run away from it. Just own it and say, like, yes, I think I am experiencing or I feel burned out. And then with the next thing that I decide to do, I ask them to consider the 10-10-10-10 rule, meaning if I decide to, in this case, avoid my being burned out, if I try to ignore it, what's that going to be like 10 minutes from now, 10 days from now, and 10 months from now? And the reality is if 10 minutes from now, I'm going to feel like, oh, that's okay. But 10 days from now, I'm going to feel like I'm still in the throes of it. It may not be the best thing to do for me at that point in time. The next thing is to reframe burnout as an opportunity. I think when companies, organizations, and individuals really get to this point, it's where they get to take an honest assessment of, rather than ignoring it, but like what might really need to change, which means they may need to consider what we call second order changes. First order change would be if I have a headache, I'm going to take some Tylenol or ibuprofen to make that headache go away. I'm trying to just manage the symptoms. But second order changes, I'm going to change the environment. I'm going to change my perspective on this. So instead of just providing a mindfulness app, for example, I'm going to pull back the curtain and say, as a team, how do we think we are doing and what do we need to do differently? That second order change gets at the processes that really contribute to a team, an organization, or a business, or an individual's experience of burnout. And then lastly, one of the things I think is really important to do is take an I and a we approach. The I part meaning that I'm taking personal responsibility for what is mine and what I need to do. The we approach is we are all in this together. And as an entrepreneur, sometimes that can be difficult because there's this idea that maybe this is all on me. But there have been studies, this one in particular that I have highlighted here, that when a we approach is taken by an entrepreneur, meaning that they consider and involve others in their day-to-day processes, decision-making, and everything that's related to that, it increases work engagement, it lowers burnout, and it lowers employee turnover, which if you think back to an earlier slide, like what are some of the direct and indirect costs of burnout? A we approach begins to really mitigate those direct and indirect costs that come about when burnout is a thing. So one of the important things to consider is prevention. Not just, okay, now it's happening, what do we do? Yes, that's important, but prevention is the key. So if you went to a doctor and they said, you need to exercise more and you should really just exercise about once a year, I hope you'll consider going to another doctor, because exercise as a prevention in health, for health, really means you have to do it a defined period of time, 30 to 60 minutes, 3 to 5 days a week or something along those lines. The same thing goes with prevention and intervention ideas with regards to burnout. At an individual level, am I doing these things? Am I taking a look at my suitcase? Am I examining my stressors, my motivations? How do I begin and end my day? I have to do a health assessment. And then this other perspective is really, really important, meaning that if I'm living in isolation from others, I'm not going to have others that are going to be able to tell me about what they're experiencing of me. And those people that know me really well are going to be some of the first ones to say, hey, Hunter, I think something may be going on. I think maybe you need to pump the brakes and you need to go talk to somebody about this stuff. And fortunately for me, I feel like I have those people that can provide that other perspective and say, you're making work too important. You need to make some other things more important at this point in time. At the group level, I'm doing an assessment and looking at prevention in terms of, is it evenly distributed? Are there barriers to doing work more effectively? Are we working on that? And one of the major parts, significant contributors to burnout, we know from the research, is that people can have a lot to do, but if there's not role clarity, meaning that they know what is their part in that, then they are more likely to experience burnout. So if someone knows what is in their purview, if they know what to do and how to do it, they are going to be less likely to experience burnout. Then when I'm talking about my colleagues and professional support, can I count on other people? Am I giving the important things priority? And conflict in particular, am I managing and leveraging conflict? Conflict to some is a dirty 4-letter word, but conflict really is just, I think, an opportunity to learn and understand and potentially do something differently. And if I lean into and manage and leverage my conflict, that's where I begin to develop new opportunities in terms of business or networking relationships and things along those lines. And then bigger picture, I think burnout has implications for what is being shown to customers and investors. If a customer walks in and they see my burned out employees, that's going to tell them something. They're going to experience that. With my investors, if I have to tell them my turnover numbers and what am I doing to take care of my employees, that's going to show, am I really considering the big picture or am I more focused on something else? So I'm going to pause here for some questions. And we got this one that just came in. And I won't say, I'll just throw it out generally, but the question is, if you have experienced burnout, how do you know you are getting better, especially if burnout causes you to quit your job? And I think that's a great question. One of the first things that I think is important to know, am I getting better, is I have to know what is important to me. And when I most often work with someone who is on the cusp of burnout or who is experiencing burnout, one of the things that is the early on to go in them in that process after we kind of dive into it is what was important to them in the beginning was lost or put on the shelf for the sake of something else. So how will I know if I'm getting better? I have to go back to what is most important to me. The second thing is I have to have people around me that are willing to say, like, give me some of that evidence and feedback of you are getting better, or there's still something lingering there. So if I have people around me that can support me, which we all need, especially right now with COVID, even though, again, I know it's going to look differently, they can tell me, are they experiencing me differently? So one of the questions I typically ask those that I work with is, so I hear you saying that you feel better, but what do those around you who are close to you that experience you on a day-to-day basis, how do they experience you? And are they experiencing you any differently now than when we first started working together? And if the answer is yes, and they can give me direct evidence, then they know that they are getting better. But sometimes, but it's kind of, again, one of those both and conversations. Individually, personally, can I get reconnected to what's important to me? Can I begin to do the day-to-day things that are important to me? And then secondly, do I have people around me that can kind of give me some evidence of, hey, you're coming out of this funk. You are doing a lot better. When it's related to job situations, what I want to be mindful of here is, I know that everyone wants to have a job that they love. And reality is that some people do love their job and it's the best thing. And some people, it's like, this is miserable and this is just the thing that gets me by day to day. Those decisions about ending my job or starting a new one, I think comes through a discernment process of what is important to me and how do I make the best decision to maybe stay where I'm staying where I'm at, or move somewhere else. And again, I don't want to give a general, this is what you should do, but I've worked with people and we've come to terms with, I've helped them come to terms with, based off of some conversations that they've had with themselves, with their family members, with friends, close friends that know them. They've been able to get to a point where they say, I need to quit my job and find something else, or I need to stay here for a little bit longer and work through some things. But that experience of burnout, I think when someone is in that, it makes that decision-making process very difficult and very challenging, because it's very challenging to look just beyond what is right in front of us. So great question. Any other questions? I've just got a few more slides and I know we've got a little bit more time. Okay. So I know not everyone, well, I'm presuming here, I'm guessing here that there are a lot of entrepreneurs on this that are here today or that may watch it later. But not everyone may be an entrepreneur. You may be in other fields, other professions. So just kind of insert what you do or what you want to do where the word entrepreneur is. And I think at some point we're all going to be confronted with these questions. The first is it realistic that I will always be on and perfect? We know that perfectionism, feeling like I have to do something at this level all the time, is one of the causes of burnout. And so is it realistic that I will always be on and perfect? And I think the answer is no. But it doesn't mean we can't do good work and a good job. How do I learn to say no to things? This is important because when I say yes to everything, it really means I'm saying no to everything. So how do I decide, what is that process I go through to decide what I give my time and my resources to at work and with those that are important to me? And then this last one, how do I learn to take care of myself? Meaning that, do I think I'm just going to sprinkle in some self-care once a month and things are going to be okay? Or do I build my day around self-care? And I want to put an asterisk here. I know that, when someone says, one of my self-care activities is yoga. Let's just take yoga, for example. I want to do yoga 5 hours a day. The reality is you probably don't have time to do yoga 5 hours a day. So what is more realistic for someone to do, but how do I build my day around those things, as opposed to just thinking I'm going to sprinkle them in once on a Saturday morning, once a month, and that's it. That doesn't get at the consistency that is needed with self-care activities as it relates to mitigating and preventing and managing burnout. So there's this idea in my world, and it may be the same, it may not. So I'll put that out there. I may be wrong here, but about the good enough entrepreneur. And these quotes up here, I think, get at that the whole perfectionism thing, 100% performance, 100% of the time is really exhausting. And is there a better way to sustain myself over the long haul than thinking that it has to be 100% of 100% all the time? Then there's this other part of, I know that I may need to step out and do something, but I'm too scared to, because I hold to this idea of perfectionism or this narrative of what an entrepreneur is supposed to do or not supposed to do. And this quote of, if we are afraid to make a mistake because we have to maintain the pretense of perfection, we will never be brave enough to try anything new or anything challenging. We will never learn and we will never grow. Sometimes, like I said, we have to experience a little bit of stress to get out and do something. And really, on the other end of something, it's usually only worth it if it is stressful. If something is easy, we get to the other side of it and there's not much to it. But those stressful experiences can be catalyst for us to think and take a look back and say, like, we did something good and worthwhile with what we were given and our time and our resources. So one of the things sometimes I propose here is doing what's called a spark. It's learning how to take healthy risk. And it answers this one question: what is one healthy risk I can do this week within 7 days to make myself a better person or the world a better place? And these specific criteria of it being immediate, controllable, challenging, positive, and specific get at, how do I begin to kind of enact this? I'm going to lean into something that's maybe a little bit discomforting, but in a good, healthy way. And it really begins to open doors of like how this becomes a healthy habit and posture of leaning into life. So to end for today, I always like to kind of leave my workshops with something kind of tangible. And really, usually I find these 3 questions to be the most tangible. What is one thing you can start doing, stop doing, and continue doing based off what you heard or took away from today? I think the start doing may be the easiest sometimes, or the continue doing. What I have found most challenging sometimes is the stop doing, because it really means that I have to take a look at maybe what I'm doing is making things more difficult than they need to be. And maybe I need to start doing something else instead. So here are a few resources to check out. And these also, the links should work if you have the PDF, I believe. But I can send these along to you if you have any questions. There's some articles, there's some books. This Modern Madness one is one that I actually found this past weekend, and is really eye-opening. But they're talking about this about 30 years ago now. And it's a really insightful, in-depth look at this idea that we have going on right now in our culture and our society relates to work and life and the conflicts that begin to emerge. But there's a lot of other resources out there. And I'm happy to answer any questions offline if you want those. There's my email address, drstanfield@thebriggsinstitute.com. But I will stop sharing my screen now, and then I will, the last few minutes that we have, open it up for any questions that anyone may have.
I'll jump in with one if nobody else has got one. It's really just a question on, I guess, individual therapy versus group therapy. And I use the term therapy quite loosely. Those of us that are entrepreneurs and business owners or serial entrepreneurs, realize that it is quite lonely at the top, and there are things you can't talk to your husband, wife, spouse about. There's things you can't talk to your buddies about. There's things that you can't talk to your business partners about, etc. I'm not really one for sitting down with a with a counselor or going through sort of individual therapy, but I do find some relief in sitting down with groups of individuals that are either going through, have been through, or will go through some similar challenges, and just kind of talking it through as a group, and just kind of reminding ourselves that we're not the only one that is sitting up at night wondering how we're going to make payroll and keep the doors open, and why nobody's buying our stuff and those various things. And I just sort of wondered if you have any input on that, whether you have any knowledge of any types of group environments like that in and around the Nashville area. Do you host anything like that? Does the EC host anything like that? Just where you can kind of, I'm burning out because of all these reasons. I feel burnout because of all these reasons. And is anyone else kind of going through it? And judging by the half a dozen people that are on here, we're obviously on here for a reason.
Yeah.
So, just some thoughts, really. I don't know if anyone else feels that same way about, kind of getting together with like-minded people and having shoulders to cry on and high fives to give out when things are going well.
Yeah.
I agree with you totally, because I feel that I'm very, very isolated. My issue is that I'm everything. I am the founder, I am the CTO, so I have to design the application and also lead the developers and test it and do marketing and do everything. And I have to say, I'm totally burnt out. I'm trying to find ways to try to cope. I believe one of the things is because I do have a developer that's on off-site out of the country, but now I'm looking to finally try to bring on maybe an intern, because I realize I just cannot do it any further.
Yeah.
And it's just, and being in the pandemic, I moved here to Nashville to be able to be close to other founders in the music business, and I'm stuck in the apartment. So it's hard. It's hard.
Yeah.
I'm really, you feel like that you're really isolated in addition to running a company. And I have 2 companies that I run, so.
Yeah. Well,
Burnout
Cheryl,
is real.
too, I just want to say thanks for chiming in and sharing what each of you are going through. I won't speak to maybe what the EC has, because I think Jeremy may be able to more so speak to that. I will just give a plug for therapy. And therapy can look a lot of different ways in a lot of different contexts. But I primarily do individual, couple, and family therapy. There is a line of thinking too that with what goes on within a company, it's very similar in a lot of ways to a family relationship. In fact, in many ways, for many people, it is their family, because it's who they spend the most amount of time with. And when those dynamics come into place, like that suitcase stuff that I was talking about, that's going to come up in some shape, form, or fashion. And there are a lot of different avenues to potentially walk through that and talk through that. Therapy is just one of them. I know many people have had many different experiences with therapy in the past in different settings. And I want to be cognizant of that and say, like, some of it probably hasn't been that great. My specific work is I work with people who are on the cusp of burning out or who are burned out, whether that's healthcare professionals or business professionals. The other thing that's unique about therapy that may also be a benefit than maybe some other outlets is that it's confidential, meaning that what you share with a therapist or a counselor is, I call it the Vegas rule. What happens in therapy stays in therapy. So there's also some of the things that I think some entrepreneurs and business owners are wanting to talk about and dive through are things that they don't want anyone else to know about. So there's that confidentiality that comes into play that may not be there in some other cases or other instances. But support in general is very important. And I always tell people, you come talk to me 1 hour a week, maybe for 10 to 12 weeks. That's great. You also need people that are there for you and with you the other 23 hours of that day and the other 6 days of the week as well. So it's, I usually pitch it as it's kind of like a both and for anyone coming in. Therapy can be helpful. We can go deep, but there are things that I can't do that your social support group that they can do. But there's things that I can do that they can't do as well. So it's kind of like a both and as opposed to an either or.
Okay. Appreciate it. Jeremy, I know EC has some great resources and you know, is there anything you can kind of add to this in a group sort of peer session that maybe addresses burnout specifically or approaching burnout or something?
Yeah, so one second. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. So I think that for any group that's like not in a program, I think that either starting one yourself can be a powerful thing. And I know it's kind of like not the answer you would want, but that's kind of what the Slack channel and groups like this kind of are for, is to say like, hey, now that you kind of know that this is a model or an important kind of topic, create your own and let people kind of self-identify with where they want to plug in at. That being said, it's interesting, Stu, when you were saying that, and maybe we can talk offline at some other point, is that's what we tried to make Founders Board to be within the programs. And for those of you guys that don't know, Founders Board is like a once a month sort of peer-to-peer conversation where individuals can bring issues that they're going through up with the group and kind of receive experience. So it's less of a therapy, but it's more of supposed to be a safe place where you can bring up the tougher issues that you're not taking to your sort of investors or your direct team or whatever, just because it's sensitive information. And so that's kind of what it intends to be. And that's a model that we can probably like open source to the community in case they want to keep those things up themselves. But yeah, I think there's different ways to skin it. We try to kind of approach it with a little bit more of a liberal model. Other groups do like very specific, like you show up, you do this for this amount of time and monitor it. And you only are allowed to experience or share your experience. You're not allowed to offer advice or feedback. So there's different ways, and Stu, that's what Founders Board within Project Music is. But happy if you guys like or have a group or something and need a place to Zoom or want to kind of ask for like a particular one pager or something, we can do that.
That's awesome, Jeremy. Thank you.
Yeah, I will say it is 2:04, so if anyone needs to bounce, they're free to. I'm just here, so if you guys do want to stay on and have more questions for Hunter, please, I guess, feel free to. But Hunter, I don't know if you have to bounce or have a minute or two. You're on mute.
Sorry, I said I could hang on for a few minutes if anybody's got any other questions.
I wanted to ask this is Letitia. I wanted to ask a really laser pointed question about approaching someone on your team or a colleague who, we can tell, or I can tell, is completely burnt out. Doing it in a way that's respectful. And, generally what I usually do is say, there aren't any big deliverables in the next week or two. Have you thought about taking a day off? Or, now would be a good time to take some time off and away and just, and regroup and refresh and revitalize. But I don't know if that's necessarily the right approach. I mean, it's not really saying, I sense you're burnt out. Do you have any comments about that?
Yeah. Wow. I think Letitia, correct?
Yeah, Letitia.
Letitia. I think there could be any number of ways to go about presenting someone with that idea. And because I don't know that person, I don't know which one of them may land the best. So here's why I would say that. Typically, what you know, some people have talked about what you're describing as kind of like, we got to have an intervention, you know, and we know that interventions tend to not produce the best motivations for change. Meaning that if someone is kind of like shoved into that, you're going to get short-term results instead of long-term results from that. Their motivation is just going to be like, I'm just going to, if I do this, everyone will shut up and leave me alone, and then I can get back with it. So I'll appease everyone. Or you're going to get the person that feels like they're backed into a corner and they're going to come out kicking and screaming. What I have found to be the best approach is send someone to talk with them that they know, like, so I want to know who can deliver the worst news to them the best, and that knows them. Meaning that if some, like one of my buddies came to me, it would be, or my wife came to me, it would be, Hunter, you've got something, like something's going on. We have to talk. We have to figure this out now. Like that would be them coming to me and saying that would be enough to kind of, okay, yeah. But for anyone else, that may put them on the defensive. So this gets at, I think, where if I know my team members and I have some relational credit in the bank, so to say, with them, and know how to deliver news to them. If I use this in my other workshops, like if I know my team members' manual, meaning that if I know how they want to be approached, how to deliver maybe not so great news to them, what irks them, all those things. If I know what's going on in their personal life, I want that person to go and have a conversation with them about this. And I want it to be a two-way conversation, meaning that I want to come with some concrete things that I'm seeing, and I want to give them the opportunity to speak back to that. Because at the core of burnout is when burnout really takes away someone's agency, their perceived felt agency. And I want to give them the agency back. So I may bring them information that says, hey, we're noticing these things and we care about you. Here's what we're noticing, but we want to know what you think too. That agency begins to help someone get out of the burnout hole.
Oh, that's
Does that make
really,
sense?
no, that's such a great nugget, because I don't think I would have considered that. I think I would consider, like, you know, showering someone with empathy and stuff would be sort of sufficient, but that's an angle I hadn't thought of. So that's really helpful. Thank you.
Well, the way, maybe a shorter way of saying it is there's the golden rule, you know, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. And then there's the platinum rule, do unto others as they want. Meaning that I have to know what works for someone, and I have to be able to do that, even though it may not be my default. So what works for me may not work for the next person. The other thing that I think is just incredibly important, especially right now with COVID, is there really is a COVID effect. People are doing some weird, strange, irrational stuff. And it's because of all of the stress that we are all walking around with. And it's just, they're not themselves. So I feel like I need to be mindful of, they're burned out, they're exhibiting these behaviors, but is it, what all's going, like this is the whole idea of attempt to understand before attempting to be understood. And I want to know what's going on for that person, and then say like, oh, that makes perfect sense, Eric, you know, or Jill, like I get that. Can I also share with you what we're noticing? And can we, this gets at the we thing, can we try to figure out what may be a way forward with that?
Thank you.
So I hope that kind of answered your question.
Yeah, that was a lot more context than I had anticipated. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
Awesome. So, man, I cannot get my Zoom stuff down. I'm calling from one number, but it's showing myself on another one. Thank you so much. I think we'll call it there. Hunter, okay. Virtual round of applause for Hunter. Snaps for Hunter. we will be sharing the video via
Okay.
the emails and things that you guys have here. I'm actually just going to start this one. We'll be sharing the videos from, to the emails that you guys sent along with the PDF, even though you guys should have already had it. Hunter, I don't know if there's a way that people can get in touch with you. Do you care if share email or anything like that?
Yeah, I will. So my email is at the end of the presentation, but I'll type my email in the chat box as well, so
Beautiful.
people can have that. And then if someone searches Hunter Stanfield at the Briggs Institute in Nashville, my information will pop up there as well.
Awesome. Well,
right.
I really enjoyed that. Sounds like the crew did as well. So thank you for dedicating your time, everyone. Thanks for showing up and for being vulnerable and sharing things about your own situation that's surely affecting everyone. So have a great rest of the day, and we'll see you at the EC soon.
Y'all too. Take care.
All right. Thanks.